Coming up on Dialogue Weekend, China and the EU complete a long-awaited investment agreement negotiation as 2020 comes to a close. What's the future for China-EU trade? China enters a new era with the Civil Code coming into force on the first day of 2021. And this week's newsmaker. Now on Dialogue Weekend.
Welcome to Dialogue Weekend. I'm Xu Jinduo. After years of arduous talks, China and the EU have completed negotiations over an APEC bilateral investment treaty, which will give both sides businesses greater access to each other's markets. How did the two overcome their difficulties and differences to reach an agreement? And what does the deal mean for the future China-EU relationship? To learn more, we are joined in the studio by Victor Gao Zhikai, Professor of Suzhou University, and on Skype by Professor Cao Fei from Aalto University School of Business in Finland. So welcome to the show, gentlemen.
Thank you.
So Victor, I will start with you. You know, the deal yet to be signed, but talks have already been finished over there. Some say this is very important for China in terms of reform and opening up. You know, they call it the second round of opening up and the reforms. Some even say this is like a China comparable to China's joining of WTO 10 years ago. You know, what's your opinion on that?
Well, first of all, we need to congratulate both China and EU for completing the negotiation for this very, very important China-EU investment agreement. This is a landmark because this paves the way for the signing, which I hope will soon take place, and also for mutual investment from China into EU and from EU into China. This is crucially important for China as well as EU because we know China right now has a lot of surplus funds. They are looking for good markets to be invested, and EU right now is also looking for funds to be invested in EU. Lots of areas need to be revitalized in EU, and signing this investment agreement will also make it easier for China and EU eventually to reach a free trade agreement. We know that China now has a free trade agreement with Iceland and with Switzerland. I hope China and EU eventually will also have a free trade agreement, and this will boost not only bilateral trade volumes, but also with this investment agreement, enable companies, governments of EU and China to mutually invest in each other's markets, and this will help China to upgrade, for example, our capabilities in many respects, and also enable European countries and European people to benefit from Chinese investments.
Yeah, growing market over there. Well, Professor Fei, here, you know, like the EU Trade Commissioner, I think Mr. Dombrovskis said that this is the most ambitious deal China has agreed upon with another party. So what does EU, or what do you, what do you make of this, 7 years time? 7 years, that's a long-term negotiation to agree with each other, at least on the investment over there. And so what is, in general, what does EU, what do people say in the different governments see the deal?
So I think indeed both China and the EU should be congratulated on reaching this deal. It was not easy, took 7 years and a lot of negotiation at the end. It's a great first step. And from the European perspective, I think there are three key benefits that Europe gets. The first and most important is much greater and equal access to China's large market of 1.4 billion people. A number of different industries are being opened up more, such as financial services, private hospitals in key cities, construction, telecommunication services. Also, very importantly, the area of cloud services, which have been previously off limits, will be opened to up to 50% equity cap. And this is important as China's going to focus a lot on that moving forward, as they are on green environmental technologies, another area that's been more opened up and can be really important in moving forward. In addition, the European countries and companies have benefited that European business is going to have more fair access to the Chinese market. There's going to be greater transparency on, for example, subsidies that are provided to Chinese firms. And also, CIA sets clear rules against requiring technology transfer for joint ventures, which was something that previously was complained about by the EU. And finally, China agrees not to lower standards in protection of the environment or labor to attract investments. And this is important. In fact, some people are calling this a value-based investment agreement, and I think that's a great way forward. But most importantly, perhaps this shows that there could be a little bit of a return to multilateral agreements, and hopefully we'll see an increasing move towards more free trade.
Seems like both of you agree that that could lead to a free trade deal. I wonder, this what kind of a message it sends out to the world, because the both sides agreed upon almost on the last day of the year 2020, and against the background of the global pandemic, global economy has suffered a great deal. The economic recovery, after we dealt with probably in the future the COVID-19 is the #1 priority to recover the economy so we can bring back our life to normal.
Absolutely. I think we need to pay tribute to the wisdom, courage, and vision of the Chinese leader and the EU leaders. Why? Because you mentioned 7 years for the arduous negotiations, including the last 4 years, where the United States was really raising the dangerous head of protectionism, and US was very much standing in the way against reaching of this agreement between EU and China. However, I think the Chinese leaders and the EU leaders demonstrated that they really cared about free trade and mutual benefit in investments, transparency, better governance, etc., environmental protection, because this is the right thing for China and EU, and also this is the right thing for the whole world. And I think this signifies the victory of globalization in the new form, and also this signifies the defeat of very dangerous protectionism in different kinds of shapes and colors. And this bodes well for 2021. And I think we take great delight that it was completed before the end of last year. And this is really a very good piece of news for China, for EU, and for the whole world for 2021. And I hope the new year will bring much better news for mankind as a whole.
Well, for Professor Fei, that Victor mentioned about protectionism. Of course, mostly people refer to Donald Trump or Trump government over there, but also in other countries, including EU members. Sometimes you do see the signs of countries taking let's say, more cautious attitudes to foreign investment. Sometimes they have the process to scrutinize foreign investment over there. You do hear some complaints from the Chinese investors on that side. Of course, probably similar complaints from the EU investors over there. Level playing field, that's a term mentioned rather frequently by the EU side. So can we say with the deal, yet to be signed, but it somehow at least reassured investors from both countries, from both sides, that they can do the investment probably in a more brave way, more confidently?
I do think it's a move in that direction. You asked me before what Europe got out of the deal. It's maybe important to also note what China got out of the deal. And probably one of the most important things is a move towards decreasing some of the challenges they've had with regulatory approvals in Europe and around the world. But this deal, of course, focuses on Europe. But I do think Chinese companies, unfortunately, are going to continue to still have some regulatory approval challenges. But China also got out of this an ability to show that they can, without the U.S., negotiate a large international deal. And that's really important, as probably the Biden administration will want to quickly start negotiations about the phase 2 trade deal with the U.S. And this will give China much more leverage in those negotiations. And finally, very importantly, this deal gives China the ability to understand that they will have longer-term access to the European market. And China always likes the long-term approach, and especially for deals like Belt and Road Initiative, that's really needed. So I think this is a great move. But it's a first step. It's important to note this is about foreign direct investment. It doesn't even touch on free trade or trade at all. And so I'm sure that there are many more agreements hopefully to come. It's also important to note that this deal has not been ratified yet. It has only been signed and by the country leaders, and the European Parliament, for example, will have to approve this. I think we'll see a lot of noise there over a variety of issues, but I think in the end it will go through since the country leaders have approved this. But it's important to note that this was sort of pushed through by the German and to some degree French leadership, and there's some smaller countries that would have liked to see more alignment with the U.S. and more focus on some issues like human rights and forced labor, where there's some disagreement about what was really happening in China.
Mm-hmm. Well, Professor Fei, you mentioned about the U.S. over there. We have seen this, folks in Washington somehow are like freaking out with the deal between China and the EU. Obviously, there's a pressure from Washington on the side of Brussels. So, what's the response from Brussels? Do people see that languages, rhetorics from Washington, from the think tanks, from the media, even from the officials? Is that an overreaction to the deal? After all, as you said, it's only about investment. It's not even trade.
No, I mean, I think it's an understandable reaction, but I think that it's important that the world understands that there are consequences to a U.S. policy, and the world can't just change instantly when an administration changes. And so I think it is a cautionary note for the U.S. to try to have a more consistent policy moving forward. But I do think you're going to try to see the Europe and the U.S. probably try to work together on some issues like potentially trade with China. And I think there probably will be some of that. I hope that this is a starting point, not an ending point. And having already worked out many details with the EU, I think it'll be easier to add on other countries, even in this FDI deal. So I do think it's going to be a very difficult time in the next weeks and months for European officials in terms of that, the Biden administration will not be happy with this. But I think they will find ways to work with China and the U.S. And actually, I think that's really good for the world, because I think it's very important, even if we would say U.S. is great in what they do, and there are some problems with what they do, no country should dominate, politics to the extent that historically the U.S. has. And so it's good that we're getting a more pluralism as a result of this.
Thank you, Mr. Fei. Victor here, I think Jeffrey Sachs, a professor from the U.S., he contributed a piece to CGTN website, actually. In the piece, he said that, the deal, of course, is good to EU side, is good to China, but also is good to the U.S. Long-term point of view, and the further opening up of the Chinese market is good to everybody, right?
I actually agree with this assessment. Why? Because for many, many years, the United States was the champion of free trade and market economy. And I think over the past 4 years, the United States had turned itself against such very, very important principles of free trade and market economy. And now it seems to be very eager to destroy free trade of all kinds and mischaracterize the market economy, for example, and this is bad for the United States. And I think China and EU getting together to finish the negotiation of this free trade agreement, investment agreement, for example, demonstrates once again that we need to depoliticize investment, and eventually, hopefully, we need to depoliticize free trade, and all countries, including European countries, China, and I hope the United States will need to come back to the right track of development, that is respecting each other and also develop your own economy, not at the expense of others, but by win-win propositions. And I think Professor Sachs is right in the sense that this China-EU investment agreement fundamentally and philosophically is also good for the United States, because this will show the American people and the Biden administration that if you do the wrong thing, then the rest of the world will not follow in the wrong direction, but they will decide to do the right thing. And right now, it is the most important time for all of us to do the right thing for a better future of mankind.
Exactly. At this point of time, more investment, more trade, and more opportunities, more jobs, instead of focusing on the differences in politics, values, etc.
Absolutely.
Well, with that, let's move closer to home here. China's civil code came into force on the first day of 2021. Many believe the promulgation of the civil code is a great achievement in the construction of rule of law for China, as well as a major event in Chinese legal history. In what ways will the civil code better protect people's civil rights and offer legal support to the country's development? To find out more, we have John Miao, partner of KPMG Legal Network firm. Well, we are connecting with John Miao here. Victor, this civil code is a bit different, obviously, from previously we called the civil laws, contract laws, law of tort. It's very inclusive. Why we are having this civil code? People say it's a milestone. What's your take on that?
Well, first of all, this civil code is a milestone, is unprecedented in PRC legal history, because it will eventually replace a dozen or so separate laws, as you mentioned, of all kinds. And you may know that when the legislature enacts a particular law, it serves a particular purpose. But then when you enact let's say a dozen or more than a dozen different laws, etc., there will be interreactions, interrelations with each other, and sometimes these interrelations with different laws actually fall apart and become amiss in either interpretation, understanding, implementation, etc. Therefore, this civil code, which encompasses of all these laws in the civil law area, is a more overarching and consolidated and highly coordinated laws, which will be easier to interpret, to implement, and to execute, for example. And this will enable China as a society and people, individuals, families, companies of all kinds to better understand the law and better abide by the law, and for the courts eventually to better interpret the law, and there will be greater certainty in all kinds of aspects of the civil code applications. So this is a breakthrough. This has never been done before in PRC history, and now we have a very consolidated, highly coordinated civil code, including contract, torts, family, property rights, you name it. And this is a great breakthrough for China as a whole.
A huge achievement over there. Of course, part of the purpose is to protect the people's rights. For example, it's also, the civil code is being made at a time, when China is highly developed, let's say, internet economy, we call it, right? In the cyber world, people, like 800 million people basically, working online, mobile online, basically. So you have, of course, when you use the internet, you leave your footprint over there, your data, your personal information, your privacy over there. How to protect that part of rights of every Chinese people is critically important, and also we need to update the protection of people's rights there.
Absolutely. I think the civil code is not carved in stone. It is a living code of laws which will eventually be amended and adapted to the changes in society as China goes along with, let's say, digital economy, 5G, etc. And the fast accelerating speed of changes in China as well as in the world involving digital economy will make it very imperative that the laws that we promulgate will need to be regularly, if not constantly, updated. Because otherwise, the laws, once being promulgated, will lag behind the changes in society. And then the more disparities, the more disconnections there will be between the law and the society at large, this will cause a lot of problem or costs to society as a whole. Therefore, I think this civil code itself, while being a major breakthrough in itself, will also demand that lawmakers going forward in the coming years and decades will constantly monitor and modify the civil code to reflect the fundamental and fast-moving changes in China.
Of course, on the other hand, another purpose of the law, people say, will boost and the economic development, the market economy, by protecting the free movement of the elements and also by protecting personal property over there. Tell us more about that. In that sense, how it will, enable basically people, every participants in the market economy, to easily probably handle their businesses, handle their lives over there.
Absolutely. For example, in China, property was actually a new phenomenon, especially being private ownership of property was codified into the Chinese constitution in the early 1980s. And then across the decades, intellectual property rights itself became more and more imperative in China. Protection of the intellectual property rights become a must in China now. So you see that with the passage of time, law as we understand it, and whatever implied by this law or the codification of the law actually changes because of the changing circumstances in China. Therefore, with the civil code, which encompasses so many things, originally being promulgated by one different law after another, now they are being very much coordinated. They are put under one envelope, for example, within one envelope, under the one roof. It's much easier to understand, it's much easier to use and to interpret and to adjudicate differences, for example. And this will create a lot of greater certainty and predictability when you do business, when you enter into contract, when you conduct your family businesses, for example. This will create a better legal framework for everyone involved in the China legal system.
Well, John Miao, welcome to the show here. Wondering, as a legal profession over there, what's your take on this civil code finally taking effect at the start of this year?
I think it's a big progress for the whole community. So I think everything's like in the 19th century, countries like France, like German Empire, as well as Japan, they actually promulgated their first civil codes. We've always wanted to publish ours. And then I think we, in the history, even in the New China's history, we kind of tried 4 times before. And this is like finally we succeeded in kind of integrate all of them together and consolidate them and publish them. So it's really a big thing, especially for on the commercial words, on the civil right words. So it's really kind of a very good start as the start of this year.
Well, because it touches upon our lives, basically every aspect of our lives. One of the issue people have been debated on is about this cooling period when there's a divorce case over there. When the couple filed a divorce case to the court, and then they will be asked to have a period of 30 days as a cooling period. What do you make of that, Zhao Miao?
Well, yeah, that question. I do have very strong opinion for that one, even if now it becomes law, but I personally still is very strongly against it. So normally, I mean, for me, that specific point in the new civil code, I kind of disagree, and I believe it was the one at the public opinion solicitation stage. That one was the most hotly debated issue as well. Normally for broken marriages, we thought, I mean, this 30 days cooling period would be kind of torturous to both parties, as the two sides of broken marriage. To me, when you look at the kind of the two sides of the legitimate interest the law wants to promote or want to protect, probably in my own opinion, it's better to provide people this autonomy or this autonomy towards how and when to end their broken marriage. And then if they really kind of, on the retrospective, they kind of want to reunite, it's easier actually to get remarried rather than that burden. I mean, the burden of getting remarried versus the burden of getting a divorce. I think the burden of the, getting a remarriage is lighter. So for me, I still hold very strongly the view that we actually should remove the 30-day cooling period. Probably it probably promotes
but
kind of this harmony thing on the surface, but then if you it only makes statistical value. However, if you look at the individuals, I think I don't kind of vote for it.
The good thing is like it's only like 30 days, right? Not like 3 years or 1 year. Well, let's leave there for now and take a look at this week's newsmaker. Vaccination is underway in many countries, just as the new variants are appearing in different parts of the world. In the new year, can vaccines defeat COVID-19 and help the world back on track? To talk more about today's newsmaker, the COVID-19 vaccines, we have Dr. Mohammed Munir, a virologist from Lancaster University. But first, Victor here, it seems like with the development of vaccines, by the United States, the UK listed approval of AstraZeneca over there, AstraZeneca, and of course Germany, etc., Chinese vaccines. So the hope now is on the vaccines for 2021.
Absolutely. I think vaccine, if successfully executed, will be a final line of defense of mankind against this very dangerous pandemic. And I'm so glad that so many governments, so many countries are working separately or sometimes together to come up with the most effective and safest vaccines that mankind can use. And I think China is very much participating in that. China is also working very closely with WHO for the International Vaccine Initiative. All this is very important, and I hope eventually mankind will feel safe to use the vaccine developed, and eventually less people will be infected and no more lives will be lost in this pandemic.
Mm-hmm. Well, Professor Munir here, you have vaccines, in the UK. Actually, UK is the first country to start vaccination of its people over there. As I asked Victor, so 2021, our hope is all on the vaccine now.
I think absolutely. We are going to start the vaccination, and some countries have already started. And I think 2021 will be the year of vaccination, probably at the scale that we never practiced before in the living history. I mean, if you really look onto the current vaccines rolled out, already 10.8 million doses already being given to the human. And of course, Israel and Bahrain, they are taking the lead of the pack, but still US, UK already started. So I'm seeing that 6 of the vaccines, those have been authorized for emergency use, would suffice the doses that are required in 2021, particularly in the developed nation, to really immunize the human population at the level to achieve the herd immunity.
Mm-hmm. So very briefly, are you sure, are you confident that 2021 will bring our lives back to normal?
I'm pretty certain that the developed nation, they would certainly immunize their population to the level to achieve the herd immunity and bringing the life relatively normal. When I say relatively, is that until the disease is not controlled in every part of the world, nobody can claim the victory. And the major challenges really lies when the low and middle income countries would receive the vaccine, which is really a daunting challenge, which I don't think is going to be achieved within 2021. So that is the challenge. WHO has a great responsibility.
We are running out
really
of time. Thank you. With that, we are coming to the end of today's show. Many thanks to our guests. You can also watch us on the CGTN app on the YouTube. I'm Xu Qinduo. Thank you for watching.
Thank you.